Hey guys, how are you? Well, I must introduce myself. My name is Gyan. I'm a part of the digital bootcamp team here at Future Food Institute. And as you can see, the fan is on. I'm dialing in from a tropical city. From the city of Mumbai, it's 33 degrees Celsius here. Well, you guys must be wondering, wait, what am I doing here? And why am I introducing myself? Well, I must say, the Food is a Conversation Instagram live session is back on. And I'm super happy to introduce an alumni of the third cohort of the Food and Climate Shaper Digital Bootcamp that happened earlier this year. So, without further ado, I would like to get in Amber Masoni on board. I am just going to try and get her in. Awesome. So yes, super happy because Amber is dialing in from Boston right now. It's 1:30 p.m. for her. Hi Amber.
Hello.
Super excited to see you.
So good to see you. How are you?
I'm good. As you know, it's midnight for me right now in Mumbai. It's pretty warm. So I was telling people on how I've got the fan turned on because it's so warm. But then,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm so excited to see you. How are you? And what's the weather like over there?
Oh, it is actually pretty chilly. I think it's like -1 degree Celsius is maybe
Oh my
correct.
god.
Um,
I love the outfit, by the way. It's amazing.
oh, thank you. Yeah.
Well, as you guys know, I'm dialing in from Boston. I am so excited to have you on board. Thank you for taking the time out because I know it's a working week and you've got university. As you guys know, she's a teaching assistant professional at Tufts as well as she's studying at the same time. So, my first question for you and for people who are joining the conversation is, how did you become a part of the Food and Climate Change Digital Bootcamp?
Yeah. So I was part of the fourth cohort of the digital camp. Can you hear me already?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So that was just this past summer. I learned about DBC actually because of LinkedIn. So I had randomly actually started following Gesina Becker, who is an incredible member of the Future Food Institute ecosystem. And so we connected and really enjoyed a lot of the content she was posting. And she took the time to speak with me and told me all about the boot camp. So I decided to apply. And as I was looking for some extra activities to partake in this summer as a graduate student, and that was how I learned about this whole wonderful ecosystem.
Oh my God, this is amazing. As a matter of fact, I found out about the Food and Climate Shaper Digital Bootcamp through an alumni who happened to attend the master's course. Her name is Elizabeth York, who attended the course, I think if I'm not wrong, in 2015. And I think during the pandemic, Gesina and I were batchmates for the first cohort that happened in July last year. So super exciting. Super crazy. All right. So excited to know that you attended the COP26 event that happened in Glasgow
Yeah.
for the past few weeks. How was it?
Yeah, honestly, it was crazy. It was a little bit of context about what was there. So I am a graduate student at Tufts University in Boston, and my school has a long-standing connection with COP through the Fletcher School of Law. That's not the school I go to, but that school with my larger university has that connection. They invited our whole school is invited to apply.
Right.
So I decided, I guess, kind of similar to the DBC. I was like, wow, this sounds like an incredible opportunity. I'm going to apply. And so I did. I found out about 4 weeks before the conference that I accepted to go. So it was a very quick turnaround. My first trip to Europe. So I'm from California is where I've spent most of my life. Just this past a year ago, I moved to Boston for graduate school. And so, yeah, so this was a big journey and adventure for me to going to Glasgow. It was in It was very chaotic, is what mine. Um, it was very inspiring. It was, there's a lot to process from it. So I felt there was a lot of juxtaposition going on. So with these negotiations happening on one hand, which are very formal, which do have representatives from around the world, and a lot of that is still kind of closed door though. So as an observer, as a student, I didn't have access to a lot of that. What I did have access to was the blue zones, as they're called. So and that is basically a big trade show. So it's kind of just this big climate change conference. There are, I think, almost 100, this is what they're called. And they range everywhere from business coalitions to country pavilions to nonprofit pavilions. And so this is actually where a lot of really interesting content is happening, because countries and NGOs are announcing partnerships, and people are really on the floor talking about what they're doing and working on in the climate space. And so I tried to attend everything I could that was related to food and agriculture in that area. And at the same time, it was sometimes hard to find food and agriculture items. And so I ultimately, at the end of the day, I was surprised to not see food and agriculture show up as much as I think it warrants a seat at this conference, and specifically the trade show part. And even specifically in the negotiation side, I think food and agriculture is about even less. And so future years, it will be our goal of everyone to keep continuing to raise our voice, elevate the issue of climate change related to climate. Sorry, that
No, no, no. It was amazing, because this brings me a lot of insight, because we had a conversation with Amanda a few days ago, who happens to be the manager the director for Climate Reality Indonesia. So quite interesting to see on how she went through from a speaker's perspective, and I'm hearing this conversation from you from an observer's perspective, especially from the youth side. So I know there's a lot of rumors going around where there was this mindset where, oh, there was not a lot of conversation about food, and the policy perspective of this conversation was all behind doors. So I also heard there were many startups who were trying to, as you said, big trade show, right? And you had many of these stalls where I think Britain was going super crazy on alternative proteins, alternative carbohydrates. As you know, Indonesia is trying to work on alternative carbohydrates, because their major source of starch is not wheat, and it's tapioca. So quite interesting to see on how different. I think we're going towards such a trend, especially for 2022, where the communication between traditional dietary cultures it's transformatory, where people are sharing cultures not only on a local level but then on a global level as well, where they're trying to pick and adapt and mix things together. But then that brings me to another question for you, especially with what you do and what you are studying right now. From an observer's perspective, besides COP26, and but then more as a climate shaper, what do you think the learnings were for well, at least during your perspective from the pandemic to what it could be for this transformatory decade?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to quickly comment on and kind of this alternative protein conversation and kind of how that showed up at the conference. It's actually really interesting, because I attended a number of talks where there on the panel was, a representative from an alternative protein company, and then also on the panel there would often be someone who is more supportive of solutions. And I think it is dependent on where we're in the world. All the solutions that may work here are not to apply around the world. And it's interesting, because some of the conversations ended up and often ends up pitting one against the other. And my opinion, kind of to back to your question then, my experience working in the food processing industry is that we shouldn't discount any solution. I think that we need to go forward with anything we've got, and there's room and space to both support regenerative agricultural practices and ecology, and also have innovation on the side as well. I think that sometimes part of the conflict that comes in, well, where does the funding come from for either or both things? And so one of the initiatives is called the Aim for Climate, and this was a collaboration between the United States and UAE, and it is very focused on climate agriculture and on innovation. And actually during the conference, there were protests by some attendees who were really frustrated that this collaboration did not focus on agroecology and on regenerative agriculture. And so there was quite, there was strong contention and really calling out of this plan for not some of these really essential components. Sorry, so I don't know if I really actually answered your question.
I mean, as you know, every statement takes me to another question. No, it's quite interesting because a lot of us did not have the opportunity to travel out there. Though I went through the climate reality training myself as well earlier this year. It's quite interesting to see on how people are trying to advocate for this, how change is trying to be made, and you said protests as well. How, again, this is for a lot of our observers out there and a lot of our viewers in the conversation. How did it feel to be right in between all those scenarios? Because you said protests, so I'm sure you witnessed some of them, and.
Yeah.
Especially from the youth's perspective, and when you know things are happening in this way, and you know it's a trade show, and you know people are trying to talk, and there's so many conferences going on back to back to back, and because I remember people were tired at the end of the day, but then there's so many things happening. How you as an individual, especially because you represented a university as well at the same time, so how if you had to place yourself, I mean, if you could recollect a few things and try and like place yourself in that scenario right now,
Yeah.
what was your mindset like? Was it angry? Was it sad? Was it agitated? Was it like, oh, we need to do something? What was it like?
Yeah, my gut reaction was like, yes, like I'm so glad these people are standing up and saying something. But it was interesting because I looked at the face of the United States Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, was speaking. He was the one who was announcing it with some of the leaders from UAE. And I was curious what his face looked like when these protesters were standing a couple of feet away from them, really angry. And his face looked really kind of sad and concerned. But and then he kind of ended up moving away, so I really get to see him. But beyond that, I was intrigued to see like the humanity in him as like the leader of agriculture in the United States, and how I could tell that he heard them. And so then actually in a later presentation, also they discussed and for initiative, he did make a point to kind of bring up agroecology and more ecological approaches that could be included in this plan. So I wondered if maybe that emotion that these protesters had, and the protesters were very angry. I wondered if maybe that got rightfully so. And again, for me, I was like, I kind of felt more like, I was just like, wow, so really grateful to kind of witness this moment. And also how do I support these people was kind of my gut reaction. Yeah. And so at the same time, it was really interesting that the protests were happening outside of COP at the same time, right?
Oh, right, okay.
Hundreds of thousands, or not, 100,000 people, I think, is how many ended up attending one of the protests. And I felt sad that I wasn't out there, But also, I also felt really privileged and lucky to be able to have a seat in the conference. So I was kind of like leaning on that side. And I was actually chatting about this with my colleague who also was able to attend. And, she was saying it would be interesting if we could attend in the future, but really be on that more civil side of being able to witness and partake in that movement, which is happening and which is just equally as powerful as the conversations that are happening behind these closed doors.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. This also takes me to another interesting question, if I may.
Yeah.
So, as you know, there's a lot of pressure on many, many countries, especially when you talk about the UAE, you talk about China, you talk about India, you talk about every practical country out there who is a member state. Keeping this perspective in mind, there has been a new outcome, as the BBC rightly said so even before it was announced, where they are trying to curb the entire temperature down to and maintain it within 1.5 degrees Celsius than the actual forecast to 2.4 degrees Celsius. Now, my question to you is, given that you are encompassing your entire career path with food and me at the same time, and we are at Future Food Institute right now, and the conversation is happening here.
Yeah.
As a climate shaper perspective and as an alumni of the FFI,
Yeah.
what kind of, you did say the food perspective was quite niche, at least it felt niche because
Yeah.
policy was happening indoors and new product development was happening in a very different perspective than what people would try to think about. I'm sure you would agree when I say that the whole conversation about food is just not on these mainstream siloed approaches, but then also in a very decentralized, emergent perspective. But then, how do you see you as a climate shaper? How do you see this taking its own turn over the next few years, especially when it comes to food?
Yeah. So I think that my experience actually with the BBC and with the Future Food Institute has really helped me reframe how we can approach problems in our system. I think that the ecosystemic teaching and even the design thinking that really taught by the Food Institute is are really incredible tools to help all of us individuals around the world move forward and try to think of creative, innovative ways to make food and agriculture problems become more mainstream. And so I think for myself, I'm figuring out what my best skill sets are and how I can best contribute. And being from the United States, I think it's really important to acknowledge that our largest hitters in the world, we have especially strong obligation to help mitigate the emissions that we are facing and do our part for what we rightfully fulfill. So I think as a food and climate shaper, just being able to continue elevating the voice through private industry, or even this whole kind of experience actually inspired me to seek out going the policy government route, which is what I intended to pivot toward more back to graduate school after working in the food processing industry. So that was on a personal note very inspiring and exciting to really help the United States be accountable for contributions to climate change.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. It kind of reminds me of our sessions with Chavi, where we talk about prosperity thinking and ecosystemic thinking. And maybe this might be a little personal, but then it's out of the context. But then, have there been any initiatives that you have been working on since the digital bootcamp when it comes to these topics?
So this year I became a graduate teaching assistant at my university for a class on climate change, mitigation, and adaptation, specifically in the food industry. So I've had the opportunity to work with a professor who previously worked at Red Cross Testing Center, and she's actually the author of this report, and more in the second report, though, which will be out in a few months is the adaptation and mitigation section of the report, which follows that first part that just came the scientific part of the report that was all over the media a couple months ago. And so,
oh wow,
yeah. And so now really kind
that's amazing.
Yeah. So
We'd love. I mean, whenever it's out there, please let us know. It would be amazing.
what was that?
Whenever it's out there, please let us know.
Oh yes. Oh, I will do. Absolutely. Yeah, and then I also was working on some research this summer, organization called Climate Works. It's a climate philanthropy based out of California, and they donate money to philanthropy. And so I was looking at what they're referring to as protein transition. So the protein transition away from carbon intensive meat production. And I was looking at one specific stakeholder. I was working with a team. We were all looking at different stakeholders. I was looking at the role that food retailers and grocery stores can have on this protein transition. And actually, the Good Institute has done a lot of work on excellent reporting on what retailers can do. So then Climate Works look at what retailers and are they doing anything related to this protein. So that was an interesting project to work.
Wow, this is amazing. So for the observers out there and for people, if you guys have any questions with regards to Amber's projects, please let us know. We can always raise these questions out to her. And if you guys do want to support her on her work, please go forward. You guys can always message her. As you guys know, she's on Instagram.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Amber, because it's so insightful, especially as an alumni who is going forward, and as we all know, it's a change-making decade, even not only for you, but then for me as well. And me talking from a product development person's perspective, it's so many things happening the next few years. This brings me to our last question for this conversation. If I had to ask you, what is your ideal or preferred food future look like?
Yeah. So I think that there are some key components to it. For me, the first part was equality, so that all people have access to, around the world, have access to water and healthy diets. Because obviously we haven't yet. And so that's the first point for me. The second is that a profitable future, so that farmers can make a living by farming, which again is a struggle in today's world. And then lastly, I think be a knowledgeable food system, so people would actually understand where their food came from and be able to know what does to a healthy, sustainable diet, because it's so confusing. Marketing and advertising towards the public is really, really confusing. And so my ideal vision would allow people to understand what's going on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I feel so positive. Oh my God. By the way, Amber, you have a lot of your alumni and your peers who have been viewing this conversation for a while. So this information is for you guys out there. The Future Food Institute, especially for the Food and Climate Shapers Digital Bootcamp, is working on creating an accreditation system for the certification course, the one that Amber and I attended, where we're trying to tie up with the University of Nebraska so we can have credits for the certificate, which is amazing. Yes, that's something that we're working on, and I think that's going to be available for the alumni as well, if I'm not wrong. But then yes, so that's something that we're working towards. This also, I'm so sorry to say, but then this also brings us to the end of our conversation for today. Whereabouts are you right now, Amber? Are you at home?
I am at home, yes.
This is amazing. Amazing. Anyways, I must say thank you though for the entire conversation. It was so insightful. As you guys know, we have started an alumni newsletter as well. So if you are an alumni, you shall be seeing the newsletter with a special quote from Amber from her time at COP26 that happened a couple of weeks ago. Thank you so much, Amber, for coming in. And it was a fun conversation because I think from an alumni's perspective and also from an observer's perspective at COP26, we have a lot to learn. And thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
So
This was such
likewise,
a
please
conversation.
look after yourself. Absolutely. Look after yourself and have a nice day, Amber.
Thank you. You too, Deanna. Bye.
Bye. Bye. See you guys. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you.
Bye.